Are you an independent musician feeling overwhelmed by the endless act of juggling creativity, business, and self-care? You're not alone. That's why I created the Artist Mind Map. The Artist Mind Map is a free blueprint designed to help you get clear on the route you need to take to attain your career goals in alignment to your artistic values. This is not just another random PDF page for the forgotten corners of your hard disk. It's a timeless roadmap you can use for decades to come. Think of it as a go-to overview to consult. When you grab your free mind map, you get exclusive access to a masterclass that will take your career to the next level. I use the same methodologies and systems for my high-end paying clients and students. So why am I giving it to you for free? Simple. I want to build a community of artists who can count on each other for safe spaces. Music saved my life. I believe that you have all that it takes to be the artist you were meant to be, if you're willing to put in the work. And more importantly, understanding what that work is. And the Artist Mind Map was designed to help you do exactly that. So if this resonates with you, go to artistmindmap.com and download this resource. artistmindmap.com.
If I ever stake my reputation, if I were the betting kind, on one struggle, I swear every single student, client, or collaborator I've ever worked with faces, it's this: the pain of not feeling seen. Before you think this is just another rant on the whole online circus that seems to have established itself as the judge and jury of what visibility even means in this day and age, hear me out. It's the kind of thing one would think is solely based on this entire game we find ourselves playing. Feed the algorithm, build our online presence, build positioning, manufacture it even if needed. But there's more to the story in my opinion. And it's a kind of system which most of us artists, creatives of any kind, seem to increasingly find ourselves feeling a victim of. And to be fair, there are parts to that theory, us being victims of a system, which I would probably even agree with. After all, me personally, I only have so many fucks to give about another algorithm I'm supposed to understand, another AI thing I need to dig into that's the newer kid on the block. Another hashtag, I don't even know if hashtags are a thing anymore, that promises me last week's definition of success. Quote-unquote success. A definition, by the way, I'm usually too overwhelmed with some random tech guru or self-help guy giving me unsolicited advice about, which, by the way, I don't remember signing up for in the first place. Forget even examine their definition of success against mine. Assuming, by the way, that I've even taken the time to define success for myself in the first place. But all of this being said and done, there's a bitter pill I personally have started to swallow of late. A parallel truth behind the fear of invisibility. One, probably a little more uncomfortable than most of us are willing to admit, or even equipped to deal with. A truth that has very little to do with the internet. Let's discuss.
Welcome to another session solocast. These solocasts were designed to help independent artists and musicians like you navigate the very complex labyrinth that is your artistic practice and career. They're based on empirical research and experiences of my own career as an independent musician and an educator and coach working with artists just like you. The primary aim behind these sessions is to offer accessibility to the kind of education many of us need to work with in order to forward ourselves in these very confusing times as empowered and independent artists in the truest sense of the word.
The paradox of invisibility. The pain of not being seen. This was an article I wrote a couple of years back, I think, and a lot of things have changed in the meanwhile as far as the overall trend of visibility and the whole PR game and what it is that an artist or creative's career means anymore in this day and age, what positioning means, what visibility means. And at the time, I remember thinking about how online etiquette, hashtags, algorithms were the core devil at the time. They were what's the term I'm looking for? The devil of the hour. And since then, there have been newer players to contend with. The most current one being AI. And to be fair, AI is probably one of the biggest contenders we've looked at for a while, because at this point we are in a situation where something that doesn't really exist, not in the way we've thought of existence being defined, can end up representing you or me, our identity. And that's big. That might actually be unprecedented in ways that are incredibly unfamiliar. That being said, all of this does not exclude a fundamental fact, in my opinion anyways, which I feel like we're not talking about enough, not in the way we really need to. That one, being seen or feeling seen has been an inherent human struggle for time immemorial. Before I go ahead with tonight's solocast, speaking of being seen, you might have noticed, well, I'll be honest, I'll be flattered if you have noticed, I haven't put out a podcast episode in a couple of weeks. And I mentioned that because it's not completely unrelated to what we're talking about tonight. I won't lie, the fear of having my quote-unquote visibility being compromised on was not something I was completely oblivious to. I don't know what the repercussions of not releasing a podcast as per schedule can turn out to be. I have no idea. And some of my colleagues might find that irresponsible, even unprofessional. Some of us do tend to have a little more stringent opinions on the commitment we ought to be showing to our chops, our skills at showing up. And I won't contradict that. Working as an entrepreneur or a creative, a musician, an artist, depending on where you find yourself on the entire spectrum of those definitions, does include showing up and showing up in your space, be that online or otherwise. And I will say, a part of me does feel like I might have treated that form of commitment in ways that you might have, a lot of mights there, heard me advise others against in the past. Let's own that for a second. But that being said, sometimes it's not just okay, but even highly recommended to consider taking a couple of steps back to take what I'm hoping to be, let's say hoping to be, more of a leap, a giant leap forward. Maybe even 3 steps backwards to take one giant leap forward. I would like to think of these past 2 weeks on similar lines. I'd like to think of these past 2 weeks as much needed rest and much needed quiet contemplation on my own to work on the deeper, inner sanctuaries of my being, to show up in ways that are more valuable to what it is I'm trying to do here. Random little fact that you might not have been interested in, but just want to let you know, in case there's anyone out there who's been wondering about my MIA for these past couple of weeks, there's my take on it. Visibility. If you've been following the thread so far, if I didn't get too distracting there with a little tangent, let's revert back to what I was trying to get at. Visibility, this whole game, So many of us find ourselves playing, posting, working on PR, showing up, and how so many of us feel like a bit of a victim to these constant changes that keep coming at us, algorithms first and online presence. I mean, it's been quite a ride for those of us who've been around for a while. Some of my colleagues even started their career before the internet was a thing. In fact, I did myself, except by the time I was into primary adulthood in my career, the internet kind of grew along with me. So the internet and me, we kind of, we were young siblings. We grew up together. So I guess I should take a minute to kind of pay homage to certain seniors who are dealing with an even broader gamut of contrast there. So yes, it's easy for us to feel like we're fighting a losing battle on some days. The degree of work we need to put in to maintain visibility, which is an important aspect of our work, for better or for worse, is dependent on so many of these factors which we feel like we don't have control over. Whole different conversation, the control aspect to it. But I would contend that there is a larger picture here, and what it really boils down to is not just about the struggles we go through in order to be seen, but the pain that the prospect of not being seen actually brings with it. The prospect of not feeling seen, which, by the way, is actually not a prospect, come to think of it. Let me rephrase that. The prospect of not being seen, not being visible, and the actual pain of not feeling seen. There is a subtle difference there. Now, all this internet talk and AI talk apart, as it turns out, in my own case, my fear of invisibility, not being seen, had a lot more to do with aspects that were taking place way before the internet was even a thing. Like the schoolyard bully. I worked years to stand up to as a kid, while my friends made a run for it. The disturbed neighbor who actually did hit me with her car because she didn't like my tattoos. Now, disclaimer, I'm not really sure what the details of that event was, but there is a good degree of truth to what I just said. I did get hit by a neighbor and her car, or a neighbor's car, who didn't like my tattoos. It was a funny vibe. Childhood friends who insisted I have the quote-unquote fat gene and I'm destined to be obese for life. For those of you who might have known me longer, you might know that I've battled morbid obesity at a certain phase of my life. The girlfriend who called me a psycho, quote-unquote, the time I wrote out a handwritten letter of undying love. Code switching between multiple social idiosyncrasies so far removed from each other that on some days I'd forget that I even exist. That kind of stuff. Now, this had nothing to do with the internet. None of these really had the internet involved per se. I managed to dive down these deep, dark holes quite efficiently on my own. I have a quote which I dare say I came up with on my own, although I probably shouldn't claim ownership to it because it's the kind of thing I'm sure many of us have kind of ended up quoting one way or the other, even if not exactly the way I put it. It goes something like this. The louder we screamed, the lesser we were heard. The louder we screamed, the lesser we were heard. Truth of the matter is, a lot of us became artists or creatives of any kind because our art might have actually been the first true mirror we had seen, first true reflection of who we are. A reflection that actually helped us see ourselves in a way that made sense. And I dare say, in a way we even liked. See ourselves for the inherently powerful, beautiful beings every single one of us holds the agency to grow into. Think about that one for a bit. Our art is a reflection of the inherently powerful beings we actually are. Regardless of how you define your art, that's a whole different conversation. I know a lot of my audiences happen to be professional artists and some don't, but that doesn't take away their inherent need to create and be creators. So anyways, the problem arose, despite this powerful mirror, when we just assumed that our quote-unquote audience would do exactly the same. See us for the same powerful beings we could see ourselves being in our art. And so when some of them didn't, that's when the pain hit. And hit us so hard that we were blinded by its impact to a very simple fact. Practicing an art, and practicing an art well, and being recognized for it are two completely different things. So, when that blinding pain pushed us down another negative spiral, with self-doubt and self-loathing and that kind of thing as self-companions, very few of us were in a position to actually process and understand what exactly was going on. And so then there was even more invisibility, because self-doubt doesn't feel very sexy. It isn't particularly attractive or magnetic to our audiences or people around us, generally speaking. And true vulnerability, it's a tricky one, true vulnerability, an inherent part of that art-making process, is a lot messier and a good deal more complex than the random Instagram rant on a bad day. So again, the louder we screamed, the lesser we were heard by the very people we were so desperate to connect to. And then the lights went out. Sure, the internet didn't always help. The whole visibility game, the PR game, it didn't help. Now, out of the blue, we had our peers' highlights to compare to our behind the scenes. Take a minute to think about that. I'm not even the first one referring to this, but still, the weight of that equation is not the kind of thing we want to ignore and bypass. We keep constantly comparing our behind the scenes in life with the highlights of our peers, of our friends. And we're kind of on a permanent drip feed of people around us flashing on about what an amazing day they had, chilling out with drinks, preferably on a tropical island as they decompress from sold-out tours or launches or business ventures that made them seven figures, or celebrate the latest Grammy or something, and ideally with the perfect partner and a six-pack and handsome friends by their side. Okay, I know I'm exaggerating, but you know exactly what I'm talking about if you've been anywhere around the spaces I have been in. Meanwhile, I'm stuck here trying to figure out how to convince my producer that I am not going to change that one chord on this song, or that one line on that verse of the song needs to stay exactly the way it is, because I want to be seen. And making those changes would dash all my chances to finally write that perfect song. That perfect song that's finally gonna get me heard, seen. Sound familiar? I don't know if you're a songwriter or a musician. I'd contend if you are, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But in case you're not, in case music is not your vocation, I would again stake my reputation that somewhere in there is something you're engaging in to compensate for some feeling of inadequacy that never feels compensated for. Pardon my boldness in making a statement like that. Think about it though. You can't stop my waist from growing, right? I'll show you. Why am I saying that? Because, as aforementioned, I've had a history of obesity. Now, obesity is a super sensitive topic in this day and age, and I want to be careful about the way I navigate something like this. But in my quote-unquote defense, I should let you know that when I talk about my past as a morbidly obese person, I'm being legitimate. Right. At 17, I apparently almost died of a heart disease. By the time I was 21, I was 110 kilos, couldn't walk up the stairs without gasping for air, was in constant pain 24/7. And that's just the beginning of the story. Let's not even go there. But I'd like to address something that I've been finally making a little more headway in being more aware of. You see, it's a long, winding road from a guy who kept piling on those kilos or pounds to ensure that nobody could at least ignore him if he was big enough. There was a rhetoric going on in my head which went like, so I'm 5'8" or 5'9". I'm not even sure. 174 centimeters anyway. Some people say that's 5'9". Some people say that's 5'8". And I have no idea why I'm being so anal about that. Probably because I'm a brown dude with a non-German name living in Germany. But that's a whole different story. Okay. Either way, so I'm 5 foot something, but you can't stop my waist from growing, right? I'll show you. There was this really weird rhetoric going around in my head at the time. Generally speaking, me being as big as I was had a lot to do, I would contend today, with my struggle to be seen. I wanted to be big enough not to be ignored. And I often find myself asking if I would have had it any other way in hindsight. You might know that my gift to myself on my 40th birthday was a six-pack, and that was not an easy journey. There's so much material out there on physical transformation, but physical transformation has only a partial relationship with the actual physicality of it all. The longer I deal with this topic, the more I realize I'm also a certified personal trainer and have a background in psychology as well. Obesity is an issue that I've obviously spent a lot of time digging deeper into, had a lot of conversations about as well. Consider having a listen to my conversation with Drew Manning. He used to call himself fit to fat to fit. There's a guy who purposely put on weight to obese degrees and then lost it twice in his life. And he eventually left the business, and I believe he's gone into academia studying psychology, which in itself is an interesting turn of events. I've been toying with the idea of having him on again now that he's not really a celebrity in the traditional sense of the word. He used to be. He was on national TV a couple of times in the US. But anyway, long story short, obesity has been, both metaphorically and literally, an important theme in my life. Not to provoke the gods here. And to recircle back to what I was trying to get to, I do often find myself asking if, that journey, if I would have had it any other way. And most people, a lot of you might be thinking that my reply to that would be a resounding no. No, that was my journey, and I wouldn't have had it in any other way. And while there is a good degree of truth to that, we all have our journeys, and they do have a certain degree of significance, though I'm not going to pretend to understand all of it all the time. But truth be told, if I did go back and do it all over again, honestly, I wish I'd known better. Known that any quote-unquote career or any idea of quote-unquote success at the cost of my well-being was a knockoff. Fake. Absolute and total bullshit. But I didn't. And I do now. So now it's about memory. And that's no easy task either. The longer we spend time on this planet, the more challenging memory becomes. Again, both literally and metaphorically. So at some point, the challenge is not forgetting to remember. And having the added solace of having gained some real life lived experience and insights that I can share with people like you, with my mentees, collaborators, clients, students, which hopefully will be helpful on their journey when we hang out. So that's me for this week. Welcome back to Tapasi Loading, by the way. Thanks for hanging out with me. Generally speaking, there are changes coming up for the podcast. I know that's the kind of thing so many of us say, but I'm working on ways to offer more enhanced experience for my listeners. I am so incredibly indebted to all of you who still take the time to come out, hang out with me, live or otherwise, listen to these podcasts, and just give me the gift of your time and energy. So I'll be spending a lot of time over the next few weeks, at least through the course of this year, to come up with ways to make the experience a more enjoyable and valuable one for you going down the line. And in the meantime, if you'd like to support this endeavor, please consider passing on the word, sharing us on your social media or your mailing lists, or just whatever your medium might be. Please remember this is a completely independent show funded by yours truly. And I am very grateful to everyone out there who's listening and is even vaguely interested in supporting me in doing so. I hope you have a wonderful week ahead.
Hey folks, I hope you found that episode helpful. Here's a little request. If you did, consider sharing this episode with your folks. Think about the ways in which they might benefit the way you did. And please don't ever hesitate to reach out if you have queries. My name's TL. I'm an independent musician and educator and the founder of the Holistic Musician Academy.